Welcome to Hope for Anxiety and OCD, episode 57. I am your host, Carrie Bach, and if you've been listening to our show for a while, you know that one of the things that we talk about are healthy relationships. And today I'm very excited to have Aaron Huey on the podcast talking about parenting your teen in crisis. Aaron is the podcast host of Beyond Risk and Back, and he also coaches parents with teens who are in deep crisis. And he's going to give us some examples of some situations that he's walked parents through who have very challenging situations with their teenagers. So welcome to the show.
Gary, thank you so much. I loved having you as a guest on mine, and I'm really honored to be on yours. Thank you.
How did you get involved in working with teens and parents?
Well, it started way back. I was one of these teens, and being in crisis for me meant living the life of experiencing being abandoned by my biological father. I was bullied mercilessly in school. I was sexually assaulted when I went to acting school after high school. And these things led me to utilize weed and alcohol and LSD as a maladaptive coping strategy. I just did not want to feel the pain that I was going through. And the way I say it was this: when I was high, I was happy. When I was sober, I was suicidal. So I had a lot of beautiful, loving people telling me, you got to get sober. You have a kid. You have to work. But I didn't have the language to say to them, when I'm sober, I'm ready to die. And having had some close calls as a child with my suicidality, I was very afraid of dying. That led, in my moment of sobriety, my moment of grace, my intimate communion with divine love and forgiveness on May 21st, 1998, set me on a path of that 12th step in recovery, which is bringing the message of hope to people who still struggle. I was running kids camps in the years afterwards and teen rites of passage programs. And we had a parent. Oh, the other thing that I was doing was driving around Boulder, Colorado on Friday nights and Saturday nights, picking up teenagers who had contacted me saying, I don't want to party this weekend. I want to go to a meeting. So the parents would say, yes, take my kid to a meeting. And so I would go to 12-step meetings on the weekend evenings. I ran a martial arts school during this time. And I had a parent who just called me one day and said, can my kid just live with you?
Whoa.
And yeah, and my wife and I discussed it. And it wasn't that they had a bad relationship. It's just that at home, this kid just kept spinning sideways. No matter what they tried, it spun out. Motivation wasn't working. So could we just create a whole new environment? So we took this kid in. That mom told her sister, who told her friend, and that friend called us and said, can my kid come live with you? And we said yes. And a week later, Carrie, we had 6 boys and 4 on a wait list. It was literally like we were being told what to do. And you have to listen. And the 12th step decrees that you say, I am here to give hope to the addict that still struggles. But right away, I saw it was the whole family. Patch Adams was a mentor of mine at a very early and for a very short time. But he said, your grandmother doesn't have Alzheimer's. Your family has it. Treat the family. And so right away, even at the very beginning, when we were just this sober home model, the kids doing martial arts with me, going to meetings, heading to the gym, doing family meals, and them doing online school, just restructuring the day with a lot of love and more love. And when they did angry, risky things, we tried to find the love and communicate love until they took over the work of love, loving themselves so much that they were fit to pop. But right away, we started in on the families. And that was the key to our success. The more we did the work, the more people wanted to do the work with us. We started taking in interns. We started taking insurance. We moved to a huge 16,000 square foot lodge on 40 acres and staff housing and everything like that. And we became one of the top treatment facilities in the United States, highest success rate, top 50 healthcare provider award in 2019 and 2020, top 100 innovator of healthcare. And 13 days ago, I closed down the facility because insurance companies decided that my property was a high risk property, and my property insurance went from $20,000 a year to $470,000 a year. And we were utterly devastated that an insurance company would not be supportive of a child care facility that had the success that we had had. So 13 days, we closed it down. I'm continuing my work with families and parents and doing parent intervention and working with teens. But we found that our success, it didn't come from the work we did with the teens. We did good work. We did cool stuff. We worked with wolves. We were very art focused. We were very unique, holistic. We did our own 12 steps. Like, we had a good kids program. But the work we did with parents, no one else did to the level that we did it. Our intervention on parents is where our success came from. So that's what I'm going to continue doing moving forward, is how can I help parents keep their kids out of jails, institutions, and morgues?
That's absolutely so true. From my experience as a counselor, and I used to work with children and teens, oftentimes we would see teens go to residential centers and the parents didn't engage in counseling. They maybe had like one weekend or something of that nature for parents. Maybe. And then the kids went right back into that environment and the whole cycle started over again. So absolutely, it is important to address a whole family in these types of situations.
Here's the thing. The way we would explain it was like this to parents, because they would want to come in and say, fix my kid, drop their kid off, pick them up in 4 months, and everything the kid was doing, they're not doing anymore, and everybody's happy.
Sure.
Number one, the moment your happiness is based upon the actions of someone else, you are in survival mode. Because that's how lizards think. If only the hawk would stop hunting, I could bake and warm myself on the rock. Right? But hawks don't stop. These kids are not making bad choices. They are expressing the language of the entire family out loud. Their confusion, their distress, the trauma becomes their language. Their behavior is their language. So to think that if a child changes what they're saying, everybody's going to be happy, means that we're not actually listening to what they're saying. Number two, at home, let's just say everybody in the family is speaking English. When a child goes to treatment, we're going to teach them the language of recovery. Let's call it Spanish. And so the child becomes fluent in recovery language, in Spanish. Now, this Spanish-speaking child comes back home to an English-speaking family. What do you think the child has to do to survive the family dynamic? They have to go back to the old language. If the parents don't change the language, then the child's language will change back to the parent's language. The
Right.
parents have to change. The moment a child, let me say that word again, child is responsible for the happiness in the home, for the self-care in the home, for the harmony of the home, is the moment the parents have lost control of the home.
Give us an idea of some of the issues that the families are facing that you've worked with.
It's a broad subject, but I can tell you the teens are expressing the distress, the trauma, the dis-ease through the mental health issues, through self-harm, through video game dependency, social media dependency, through drug use, whether or not people think that cannabis is a drug. It does change brain chemistry. It does.
It does. Yeah.
All the research shows that it does. Is it heroin? Absolutely not. And I'm sure you working as a counselor, you've seen, I have never, in 20 years of working with a kid who is struggling with drugs or any dependency issue, I have never not found trauma. Not once. There's
That's
always
huge.
trauma.
Yeah.
Understanding trauma is a key for parents in this, because we will always find trauma with mental health issues, co-occurring with dependency issues. Self-harm is a dependency issue. When kids are cutting, it follows the exact same cycles as someone who's using. So as a facility, we specialized in dual diagnosis, and we were trauma ingrained. We were always looking for the trauma. And any parent who says, but my kid has none, has two things going on. Number one, parents go online and take the ACE quiz, ACE, Adverse Childhood Experiences. Do it for yourself and do it for your kids, because you will find a root. And those roots create the fruits. It's not a kid's bad choices. I hate that term, bad choices, that families are struggling with. It's the risky choices that children, teens are making. And that's the fruit. And you cannot pluck a fruit and demand the tree gives you a different fruit. You have to go to the roots. Epigenetics is the roots. Your own trauma is the roots. The divorce you had, which maybe you and your ex are best friends, it's still a little T trauma. It could be a big T trauma to your kid. So what we see in families, parents always want to avoid, the therapist sitting down and saying, tell me about your mother, because nobody wants to blame for their children. But if there's a failure point in the family system, we cannot expect the child to fix it.
Yeah. I think that there's an element there where school systems and bullying, and it's how we handle those things as parents, I think is important. Trying to make sure that your child has a positive educational environment. It's very easy for children to just get labeled as a bad kid. Like they're non-compliant, they're non-cooperative, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, they're difficult. They're the strong-willed child, whatever you end up labeling them as, and then it taints everyone's view and interaction of them from that moment forward. And that happens in all of those systems that you talked about.
Well, so much of this has to do with us stepping back from the results and the actions that the child is taking and the results that they're getting, which are less than favorable results, and step back and look at systemic failure. Regardless of what end of the political spectrum you are on, I bet that 99% of us believe that the political system has failed. We all share a common belief that the education system has failed. Now, I'm not saying teachers. Teachers are warriors. They do it for the outcome, not the income. Anybody who does it for the outcome, not the income. Soldiers, ER nurses, teachers, these are the warriors of our society who are really doing it for the right reason. But the system, the political system, the military system, the things that these people are working under have failed our children. The healthcare system has failed our children and our families. These are massive systems. Now take another step back and look at how we are sitting in the midst of a global pandemic, a belief that the air you breathe, the people you love, if they touch you or breathe near you, it could kill you. And in America, 700,000 people have died from being breathed on. This is a level of fear and failure that we are living with that I have to ask the question, does anybody feel safe? Do you feel safe walking outside? We're told that violence is on the rise, suicide's on the rise, drug use is on the rise. People are standing in the streets screaming at each other. Nobody thinks they're on the wrong side of history or the wrong side of the spectrum. Nobody thinks they're the bad guy. And our own backyards are filled with weeds that need pulling. And we're wondering why 25% of the children ages 13 to 17 are displaying clinical anxiety issues. This is the result of systemic failure. Now, labeling kids bad because of how they're labeling a child bad because of how they're handling systemic failure, something that they have no recourse to change. How do we allow ourselves as adults to say that kids are making bad choices when what we see with adults is systemic failure?
I think that leads kind of into the next question is we have more and more teens that are facing severe mental health issues. Yeah. Do you feel like it's harder to be a teen today than when you and I were growing up? I mean, there's different challenges with social media and all of that.
This is such a powerful question because it is something, and I love Facebook. And as a Gen Xer and being connected to the Gen X and the boomer communities and having millennial kids and working with the younger generation, the iGen or the Gen Zs, there is a belief that these kids are somehow less resilient than we are. That somehow these kids don't know how to pull up by their bootstraps. There's a few points we have to look at. Number one, psychoanalysts, psychologists are saying that there's a truth to that, but that's an environmental. It's like there's an environmental poison that's affecting them that we have to take a look at. So what are these environmental poisons that are making these children less resilient than we are? Number one, in the past 20 years, the research on trauma pretty much indicates that the Gen X generation and the boomer generation are walking wounded, that we are traumatized, We have denied it, compartmentalized it, and buried it. And our parenting reflects that we have not addressed our own issues, right? We still think therapy is for crazy people, and then our children are crazy for needing it. And it's just flat out wrong. PTSD is much more prolific and prominent than we ever thought. Understanding things like autism and ADHD and OCD and anxiety and depression, really understanding this has led a lot of adults to go, oh, well, I'm depressed. Like, yeah, you are. Like, we've all had to live with it. How about you go do something about it? So that's number one, is that we know more, and it looks like these kids are being affected by it. We are just treating them for it. Number two, can you remember when you were in elementary school, really, really young age, or middle school, or even high school, and the last time, the very last one in primary school, where you had to practice a live shooter drill? This is something that we didn't have to deal with. Right. And if you watch the videos of what just took place in Texas, that the kids were filming with their phones, watching the police open the door and say, everybody hands up, we're knocking down your barricade. And they pushed the barricade over. 3 police walked into a classroom with fully automatic weapons, fully loaded, fully armored, saying, is everybody okay? And when you hear the children go, yeah, you hear the trauma.
Right.
Because someone opened fire in the school. We didn't have to live with that. Number 3, the anarchy of the internet. Can you imagine as a child having full and total access, uncontrolled library card, limitless borrow to the Library of Alexandria? Everything, the sum total of human knowledge is available to our children in their pockets, and 30% of it is pornography. Can you imagine a library with 30% of that library, those books were pornographic, and the other 70% was everything else? That's the internet. So we have all those things. And now we're going to call the children less resilient. We're going to call them that they need to just buckle down. You know what? They didn't ask for the ribbon for participation. They didn't ask for a graduation ceremony from 2nd to 3rd grade when we had to wait till we were in high school. You know who's giving it to them? The adults. Right. We can't say that they're more fragile. If we treat our children like glass, they will grow up breakable. And when we don't pay attention to the cracks, they will shatter. So this cannot be something that we look at the children, we go, you should be better. We have to look at the adults and go, you should do better. And that's hard. We don't want to hear that. We love our kids, and we are trying our hardest, and we are working with what we have. That got us here. You want to get there, you got to do something different. And I say, I'm not going to call you enabling. I'm not going to say you're codependent. I'm going to say everything we did as parents got us to this point. What can we do differently to get away from this? That's the work.
I'm sure there are plenty of parents out there that feel like, they're doing a good job. And I wonder, what are some common things that you see maybe well-meaning parents do that aren't helpful for their children, especially children going through a crisis or trauma?
Well, what a beautiful question, Carrie. And I'll say, though I had a completely absent biological father, I had an amazing dad who adopted me when I was 4 years old. And I got to say, my mom was extremely progressive. She had great ideas. She was a good mom. She was a work-at-home mom. She was head of the HOA in the theater. She was active in her community. She was a La Leche League leader and a La Leche League instructor trainer. So she was constantly teaching other women in the community to support them in being moms. My dad was a hardworking businessman in the community who was respected, and he was an amazing dad. I had incredible parents, and I bet that bottle of vodka in their liquor cabinet to this day, because it's the same one that was there when I was a kid, is still half water because I replaced it. We have to understand that one of the mistakes we make as parents is no matter how good we do, your kids are still affected by other environments and traumas. Your kids are still affected. It's hard with parents who've adopted their kids to say, I've given you everything, except parents who've adopted kids. You haven't given them their biological parents. And if you don't understand the wound that creates, then you will never understand that it won't matter how much love and support you give them. You cannot fill that void. You are not designed to. That means a different kind of work than you're doing. So that's one thing, is thinking that somehow it's something that we've done or not done is the root. And we go through the list of all the good things we've done and say, I don't understand. You're just acting out. What are you acting out for? Second, is that parents don't really do the education about mental health. When kids are dealing with anxiety and depression, you have to understand this is not about willingness. This is about capability. Depression is not a feeling. It cannot be solved by getting up and going jogging. It can be solved by getting up and going jogging every day for 90 days. That can be the beginning of the solution, but we also may need pills. It's pills and skills. But the mistake we make is thinking that this depression is an attitude. And actually, depression is a description of brain chemistry. The brain's functioning is depressed. The brain is depressed, not the emotions. The emotions are sad, hopeless. The brain's chemistry is depressed. Anxiety is not an attitude. It's a response from the amygdala when the environment matches the picture of a trauma. And so it sets off an alarm in the body, and the body goes into shutdown mode. And understanding this, understanding why your kid is attracted to cannabis, understanding why your kid is attracted to cutting and what's going on in the brain, that's the work. It's not we punish because we think it's about willingness. My kid's just not willing. We have to wonder if our kid's not capable, because if we're punishing their inability to do something, we are making it worse. And that's one thing that I see good parents do. Mistake capability for willingness.
Right.
Second thing I see good parents do is the moment the kid starts spinning out, the kid becomes the focal point. The kid becomes the patient of the family. And so mom and dad are talking, mom and ex are talking, dad and ex are talking, the other siblings are talking, aunts and uncles are brought in on the situation because dad's on the phone with his mom and saying, yeah, my kid's just blowing sideways, and mom's telling dad's sister. And then everybody gets together for Christmas, and there's this tiptoeing around this kid who's struggling, and they feel it on a psychic level. And the child becomes the patient, and everybody says this child needs to change. Energetically, psychically, or verbally out loud, this child all of a sudden is the black sheep of the family. When in truth, if the parent changed the dialogue to say, this family is struggling with depression, and it's really hard on little Johnny. This family is dealing with anxiety. This family is dealing with self-harm issues. And we're all doing our work. And everybody does their work. And everybody recovers. And we say to the kid, hey, we're all going into recovery. We know this isn't just about you, that you're actually talking the family language out loud. To have that courage as a parent to say, you're speaking the family language out loud, and you've shown us a lot of things that we could do differently. And we didn't know how to do it differently. But because of you and because of how you're going through this struggle, we've realized we all have to make some changes. So we're in, and we're with you, and we're together.
I like that. I interviewed someone recently who had a spouse that went into the psychiatric hospital, and she shared her story about how that really triggered up some of her own stuff. And she went to therapy to help herself and also figure out how she could support herself. But she knew that she had to put on her own oxygen mask first. And I imagine it's similar with parents. Like, they have to be willing to read the books about, depression, get some help, read some materials, learn different styles of communication, whatever it is, like you said, doing their work as well. And then being able to communicate to your teenager, I think, is so powerful, to say, like, hey, I'm in this with you. I'm learning new things. I know that I don't have it all together. I think that vulnerability as a parent is really powerful.
It's amazing, Carrie, because you have perfectly demonstrated the trap we fall in as parents about avoiding the work and thinking that, reading the book about depression so that we can help our children is the work. That's actually the third thing you do. That's not the first. Right. And I love that you said that, because that is the first thing we all gravitate to as sort of parents. My kid's got anxiety. I better get online and learn about anxiety. And we study and we print out articles and we call our spouse and we call our moms and we dig and we give the article to our children. We are still making the child first. We are still totally and solely focused on this child. The first thing we do as parents when our children starts to struggle, if we find out, God forbid, we find out that something has happened to our daughter or our son and they have been sexually assaulted, they're being bullied at school. The first thing we do is like, what can I do for them? And we think that's good parenting. But what we forget is that when our child has a suicide attempt, we are traumatized.
Right. That's huge.
When we are traumatized because of something that happened to our kid or something that our kid does, they steal the car, they wreck it, they total it. The police show up and they are smashed out of their mind on drugs. And we had no idea they were even using. You are traumatized. Now, what you're doing is parenting from that place. And when we are traumatized, what happens, we stop sleeping well, we stop eating well, we stop drinking water, we stop moving our bodies, and we stop breathing on purpose. And if one of those things slips, if one of those things goes away, the other four will follow. Because it is a domino of biology. The moment I am not sleeping, the moment I am not eating, right? My blood sugar levels are crashing up and down. I have coffee because it's morning. I don't eat until 1 o'clock and I have a total sugar crash. So I eat, and what am I craving? I'm craving something that's going to jack my energy right back up. So it's a lot of carbs. And so I jump right back up and I'm just on this roller coaster of blood sugar. And I'm not drinking enough water. My system is no longer lubricated. I'm coffee and I'm soda and I'm energy drinks and I'm doing whatever to sustain because I got to be there for my kid. I got to do the right thing for my kid. And I'm not sleeping that night because my system's all jacked. And now I'm supposed to come up with a good consequence that's actually going to focus my kid on their strategy and not my emotions. There is no way to be a good parent from a bad place. You cannot accidentally parent your child out of crisis well. You have to do it on purpose, which means, number one, parents, you take care of yourself first. You do the Fab Five: sleep, drinking water, eating nutritious food, moving your body, and even if it's only one, even if it's for an hour, I don't care, breathe on purpose, not accidentally breathe through the day, but actually go, whoa, Aaron, you are not breathing. You know what? I just practiced self-care. Now, the second thing I do, more important than now running to go parent my child, the second thing I do is I tend to my adult relationships because children cannot relate to my emotional experience. Children cannot relate to my level of fatigue, fear, anger, or anxiety with what's going on in my home. I have to find other adults who relate. And I've got to be with those adults. I got to join a support group. I don't care if it's on Facebook or if it's in your church basement. You join a group and you find other adults in your community who are going through what you're going through. And if you can't find them, start one. Be that parent who says, hey, I need other parents who are struggling with kids, and call it Parenting Teens That Struggle. I don't know. I just made that name up. That's the name of my group on Facebook, folks. Join me. But just start it if you can't find it. Now, I'm also talking about your marriage or your exes, your parenting partners, your loves. You have to tend to your adult relationships because that's your support system. You got to go vent with your husband and be like, this kid, I'm going to blah, 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 I can't take it anymore. And your spouse goes, that was intense. Are you doing okay? I'm just listening. I'm just being here. Don't expect my feedback in this moment. How you doing? And you've got to have these huge fear, frustration, anger, and anxiety and fatigue experiences with another adult. So self-care first, adult relationship care second. Now you're ready to go parent.
You have really hit the nail on the head there. We have to have an outlet for our intense emotions when we are dealing with someone that's going through crisis, meaning that we're experiencing the crisis and the trauma ourselves. Like, this is real work. And I think what you're saying is a lot of people, they focus the same level of energy, but they're focusing on the wrong areas. And if they disperse some of that energy towards themselves, towards healthy relationships, then they will have that energy that they need to give to their child. But it won't be like this overwhelming, overarching, smothering, we got to fix you energy, because they'll have dispersed some of that.
The anger, fatigue, fear, anxiety, frustration that we bring to our parenting forces the children to focus on our emotions. Emotions aren't leverage. Emotions are not consequences, especially when our kids become teenagers. We have big, huge emotions. A teenager could beat you in that game. They can go way over the edge. You have big tears and hollering voices, and all of a sudden they call you a name that you have to go look up. You suddenly find yourself on Urban Dictionary going, wow, that's what that means? Geez, that kid was, I'm devastated. I'm not saying you can't have emotions. I'm saying you can't use those emotions as consequences. You can't leverage those emotions to get your child to focus on their strategy. That's what consequences are supposed to do, is to get the child to look at what they're doing and go, well, that didn't work. But see, if your emotions and you give me your phone, they're not going to focus on losing their phone. They're going to focus on how you took it. The truth is, when I coach parents, I care less what the parent does and more how they do it. Because look, there's two ways to take a child's phone. Well, there's actually 1,000, but I'll give you two choices. There's this way. I can't believe you did that. You can't send pictures like this. You're under it. Give me your phone. No, you can't have it back. Enough. I'm tired. I'm done. Or I'm really sorry you're going through this. Now, we have agreements in this house that I'm willing to provide a phone and internet as long as there's no lying, stealing, sneaking, cheating, or breaking the law. And you know this. I also know that being a teenager is really hard. So I'm going to go ahead and manage your phone and the internet for 2 weeks. And as things change, I'll change what I manage. I'm really sorry. I love you. And I know you're going through some rough times. Now, on both of those, I'm taking the phone away. On one of those, before I ever talk to my kid, to have that level of voice, that level of calmness, that level of connection before correction, alliance before compliance, to have that, I have to have been resourced. I have to settle my own nervous system. I have to remember. I got to hit my knees in conscious prayer, not just those desperate nights when I can't sleep and I'm crying out for some intervention from the divine, but actually saying at 12:30 today, I'm going to spend some time with my book and some time with my God. And I'm just going to ask to be shown the light in all this darkness and to be deliberate in your prayers, to write down a list of things you want to ask for, to communicate clearly. What I do know is that you actually writing down the list of what you're going to ask God for is you using your prefrontal cortex, not your survival. Oh God, someone help me. You have to come out of survival mode if you want your kids to thrive. Right. You cannot accidentally parent your child out of crisis. It does not, never, ever, no how, no way work.
Tell us about how people can find and get in touch with you.
I have a few freebies I want to start with. First and foremost, Carrie, thank you for the opportunity to talk to your moms and dads, the people listening to your podcast. I really appreciate the opportunity. Parents, I have a free Facebook group called Parenting Teens That Struggle. I moderate it. My daughter moderates it as well. I have some other therapists that I really know, like, and trust who are on there. Vani Dilger, Kaya, and you got to see Kaya on Notes by Kaya on Instagram. She's awesome. And Carrie, if you can get her as a guest, she is a wonderful, wonderful woman. This is just, I have 1,600 parents on there who are just supporting each other. And these are parents who are in pretty deep crisis. And it's just a place to go up and email and go, here's everything that's going on in my family. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed and no one else is going through this and I'm terminally unique. And 15 to 30 other parents will go, oh no, that's exactly what I'm going through. And that's the moment of tending to yourself and tending to your adult relationships that you go, oh, thank God, I am not alone, because you're not. Parenting Teens That Struggle on Facebook. I post videos, I post podcasts, I answer questions, and other families engage with what you're going through. The second thing is my podcast, Beyond Risk and Back. This is for the parents of kids who are really struggling. And this is where I interview the experts, people like Carrie, to talk about OCD and anxiety, to come on and give you their advice. So not everything's coming from me, but I'm just a conduit where the experts can speak through my medium. And I have learned so much from people like you, Carrie. And I know in our show, I called you as like, I got to know about OCD because there's, oh my God, I'm so OCD. And then there's OCD. And right. OCD is devastating to watch anybody that you love go through. And to hear from you, to give you to my audience, to have my audience go, oh, okay, now my kid's just a little type
peculiar.
A. Yeah, peculiar versus my child is counting steps to the door. And if they don't get the right steps, they go back. And, this is interfering. This is dysfunction. Right. So beyond risk and back, parenting teens that struggle. And then third, if you go to brabapp.com, BRABAPP, BRAB stands for beyond risk and back, brabapp.com, for the same cost as a week's worth of coffee, I put up 56 parenting sessions in a red, yellow, and green course. And you can take the classes. The red is the deep crisis, the yellow is the at-risk, and the green is things are going good, but man, they could be great. This child is a world changer. What do I have to do as a parent differently to inspire this kid to the next level of expression and connection with the world? So all of these are everything that I have ever taught a parent. And I made it extremely affordable because I want every parent to feel supported, not just the ones who can afford treatment. And let's be clear, folks, treatment is expensive, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. So let's try changing the home before we go ask the kid to change so that the home can feel better. That's the backwards way of doing it.
So towards the end of every podcast, I like our guests to share a story of hope, since this is called Hope for Anxiety and OCD. And so this is a time in which you received hope from God or another person.
On May 21st, 1998, I stopped using drugs and alcohol for good. On May 20th, 1998, I hit my knees and I asked for a miracle. I had been a minister since 1996. I've had a very colorful spiritual life. But despite my promises to God, despite my promises to my daughter, despite my promises to who became my ex-wife, I loved drugs more, to the point where the shame and the guilt forced me to my knees. And I said, I can't stop. You have to stop me. I'm not going to quit. You have to make me quit. And I'm asking for a miracle. I'm asking to be shown that there's something outside of this, because otherwise this is going to kill me and I'm slowly dying. You have to bring me back to life. The next morning I got up and I went to work and I got in my truck and I got high as I was driving to work and my truck died. And my parents lived out in the country outside of Longmont, Colorado. And so I had to walk about 1.5 miles to get to a phone so I could call my dad to come pick me up. So I got my drugs and I got my paraphernalia and I started walking, leaving my truck on the side of the road. And up ahead on my left, as I was walking down this dirt road, was this small, and it's the quintessential picture in your brain of an old country church, right? Little white buildings, single room, steeple and cross in the front. Quintessential Norman Rockwell painting that you could imagine. And so I'm walking towards it. I hear this noise. And I know what's coming, and my heart starts pounding. I know that I'm about to get what I asked for, which was the end. It was my personal Babylon was showing up. And as I'm walking, I'm getting closer. I'm staring at this church, trying not to look at it. And it's just, and it's getting louder and louder as I'm walking toward it. And I'm terrified. Because all I did was say, stop me. And now I knew that I was about to get stopped. I'm standing across the street from the driveway to this church, and the noise is now like the worst scratching TV fuzz, and it was so loud. And I turned and looked, and Christ was standing there. And he said, you can put down the drugs now for the rest of your life and never look back.
Wow.
And the feeling of love and forgiveness that I experienced in that moment, the overwhelm of pure unconditional love, the thing that I had always been searching for and had never found. It just washed me. And I took my drugs out of my pocket, and Carrie, I swear on everything, that bag hit the ground and a wind went and blew it out. I threw my pipe in a ditch and I burst into tears, and the noise was gone and the experience was over, and I walked. And if that was the end of the miracle, then this would be a nice short story, but I'm going to have to take you deeper into what happened next. So I go and I hit the phone My dad comes and picks me up. I get home, I call work, tell them I'm not coming in. They're not surprised. I'm absent all the time because I'm always high. And I go up to my room and I call the Triangle Club, the 12-step group there in Longmont, Colorado on Main Street. And I had called them 2 weeks prior and the line was busy. And I promise you that I took that as a sign from God that I was overreacting and that drugs weren't that bad, right? I had lost my home, custody of my daughter, my marriage. I was living either in my parents' house at 28 years old or I was living in the back of my truck, and drugs weren't that bad, right? That's how insane this thing is. But this time when I called, that the night of that first experience, May 21st, I called the 12-step and somebody answered on the first ring and they said, Triangle Club. And I said, when's your next NA meeting? I think I'm an addict. And the guy said, where are you? I'll come get you. And I said, don't do this. And he goes, it's okay, man. And I said, don't you say it. I'm not ready to hear it. And it got all quiet. And he said, I love you. It's okay. And I said, I can't do this right now. And he goes, every hour we have a meeting. If you need a ride, someone will get you. And I hung up the phone on him. And there was that love of a stranger. Somebody who didn't know me, didn't know my past, and he was willing to say, I love you.
Wow.
So then the next morning, I wake up and I go downstairs and I've decided I have the day off, so I'm going to a meeting. And I go downstairs and my parents are watching TV. I kid you not, they're watching Clean and Sober with Michael Keaton. And wow. I sit down on the couch and I'm like, I can't believe this. And like, this is the sustained miracle and I'm exhausted. And I sit down and I turn off the TV and my mom goes, she has this funny way of saying it. It's very endearing. She goes, excuse me? And she was being goofy. And I look at her and I'm about to break her heart. And I say, I'm not going to a meeting at work. I'm going to a 12-step meeting. I'm an addict. And my mom goes pale. And my dad, the man who raised me, not my father, but the man who gave me everything, who I had lied to, who had stolen from and hurt his younger biological children. He looked at me and he goes, whatever you need me to do, I'll do it because I love you. And it was those 3 experiences of unconditional love that I just said, that's it. That's what this is about. I don't love me, but everybody else does. And this thing that I've always been seeking for has been seeking me. And I just have to let it in now. And that's what I say to families and to teenagers is A, I love you. And B, what you are seeking is seeking you. And that was the miracle I got on May 21st, 1998, and then on the 22nd. The miracles continue. A biker who yanked me back into my chair at the 12-step meeting, who told me to sit down and shut up for once in my life and maybe I'll learn something, who became my sponsor. And the police officer that pulled me over after my first meeting and said, you know, who I told him it was my first meeting. It was the first time I didn't have drugs in my vehicle in 7 years and I didn't have to lie. And he looked at me and he saw the big stack of 12-step books in my truck and he goes, keep going back. It works if you work it and you're worth it, which is what we say at the end of every 12-step meeting, which told me he was a member.
He understood. Yeah.
And 23 years later, the miracle still continues. And that's been my life for 23 years. I was born 23 years ago. And the sadness, these are tears of joy, folks, because I have such a beautiful, blessed life. I have my daughter. I have a son. My ex-wife and I are friends. I love my parents, and they did so well. My brothers and I get along. My business is successful. And all I do is the 12th step. I bring the message of hope to people who still suffer.
Yeah. Aaron, that's such a powerful testimony. It's just amazing. I don't think we can ever underestimate the power of unconditionally loving another human being. And when we bring in that unconditional love to someone else, we are showing them the love of God that God has, showed us. And so many times, tries to get our attention and we've ignored. And then, like you said, you have to allow it to come in to your, it's there for you, understanding that unconditional love and acceptance is there for you, but you have to let it in sometimes. Man, that's That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing the story and going deep with us on that.
If there's one thing I can say, I've not met the devil, but if the devil is here on earth, it's addiction. It's that only people in addiction understand how far the devil can take you down. Loving when things are going good, loving an addict who struggles, loving your kids. Those two things are, when things are easy, when things are good, love is easy, love is good. But when you're standing at the gates of hell, love is divine, and it's the hardest place to find it.
Yeah. Well, I just appreciate you sharing just all your wisdom for parents that are struggling, that have teens in crisis, and hopefully this gives them some hope and some ideas that things can turn around. And yeah, then just thank you for being here. Wow, that was probably one of the most powerful stories of hope that we have had on the show. I'm so glad that Aaron came and shared that with us. I know Aaron spoke of a show that we recorded together for his podcast and wanted to let you know at the time of this recording that hasn't come out yet. Just in the nature of podcast recording and how we batch episodes, I believe mine is going to be coming out before his. When that episode does come out on OCD, I will link it to this episode so you can listen to it. Aaron asked me some really great questions about OCD, and it was a super great experience to be on his show as well. So check the show notes here, or we'll also be posting it on social media with links from our Instagram and Facebook pages. You can always follow along on either of those pages for the most up-to-date information about our show. And hopefully it's a way for you to receive a little bit of a daily dose of encouragement. Hope for Anxiety and OCD is a production of By the Well Counseling in Smyrna, Tennessee. Our original music is by Brandon Mangrum. Until next time, may you be comforted by God's great love for you.